Hello, I'm going to be helping you with determining drought severity lab. And I want to give you some guidance and some tips on what to do, what not to do, how to use the database, and some just basic housekeeping issues that need to stay on your brain as you're working this activity. So you may be wondering, I'm asking for all of the answers to be in red on your lab form. I will open the lab form in just a second and show you how this works. I need to physically be able to differentiate your answers from my question. With that, I might add that it is important you never delete the questions. So basically, if I receive an assignment that just has answers with no questions, that gives me no framework from which to pull and grade appropriately your work. So you should expect that it won't get graded. So please don't do that. Just turn it in as it is. So you might be wondering, why am I asking you for the red font? I gave you the basic reason. It's because of a learning disability I have, and I'm fine with sharing that with you. So here's the lab form. And by the way, you will have to enter the header in order to put your name block there. So let's say you've not worked with headers before, just double click on the area. It'll become illuminated. If you don't want to have to type over this, just or select it and make it go away and just put in your name. To get out of the header, put your mouse cursor into the main document. This prevents you from having to put your name on every page. So you're going to want to read all of this. Not only did I give you an introduction and step-by-step instructions, I give you examples of what you'll see in the database, so it's very clear. Now, I'm making this video on a day in February, and as you look at this, the dates are not going to be the same as what you're using, so the data you're seeing here is not accurate for when you do the lab. But the actual maps, you can recognize it, and that's the whole point. Let me define something, and that is when you get to this main web page, which I'll show you how to get to in a second, you will see what's called a navigation bar, just like we have in Brightspace, basically in the same place. And it's important that you determine where you are in this navigation bar for the various different questions. One of the things you're going to need to do is be able to understand the intensity and impact section of the map legend that's right under the main map that's called current map and the Drought Monitor website. These colors correspond to a drought intensity and impact. So D stands for drought, obviously, and then there's a D0 through a D4. And each one has a different level of drought intensity. So when you correlate that to the actual map itself, then you can get into a more local area, which is called a region. And even then you can click on specific parts. Let's say we're looking at Texas and I want to see what's going out here in West Texas versus South Texas versus the Panhandle in East Texas. That's important because it tells a story more locally. So how does that translate to real life scenario? When it comes to drought planning, water planning for city planners, like people who run water supplies and city managers, they have to start making decisions about when they're going to restrict water use. And this is the kind of tool they use to make those decisions. So let's say you're in East Texas and they decide they want to put you on water restrictions. Well, based on this map, that's not necessary. But if you lived over here in West Texas, South Texas, even parts of South Central Texas, yeah, there might be a need for it. This is how decisions are made in science with data-driven information. So as you look through all of this information, when you get to the part where your questions start with number 1, when you get ready to do your lab, what I'm going to ask you to do is come in and take out everything before those questions. So in other words, you're going to do exactly what I'm doing here. And you will turn your lab into this. So it starts with number 1. Don't remove any question. Don't remove any instructions. Don't remove any of these illustrations. They help me keep on track. But what you will notice is right after the word answer, you would write whatever that might be. So I'm going to say whatever that might be. Can you see that it's red and it matches exactly what I need to differentiate where your particular answers are? So now let me get into the actual lab in terms of using the monitor, and you'll be good to go. So click here for the Drought Monitor Map. Let me give you some pieces of advice. Let's say it doesn't work when you load it up. Next thing you should do is open up a different browser, not the one that you're in. Let's say you're in Chrome, try Firefox, vice versa. And if this link fails you, then do a Google search for the United States Drought Monitor Map. This thing's updated weekly and it's used nationwide. So it's something that's readily available. And so sometimes I get remarks from students, like emails that say, well, Dr. Wagner, your link isn't working. And typically they haven't done the research to maybe look on their own. So as somebody who cares about your educational career, not just here at the school you're with us now, but let's say 2, 4, 6 years down the line when you're considering finishing your bachelor's, maybe going into a master's or a doctoral program, you need to be able to do some of this on your own and find resources. If there's the number one takeaway from college, it should be learning how to find things, resources. So in the old days, I would have had to go to the library and actually find printed literature on the library shelf in order to do what I'm asking you to do today. Instead, everything's at the click of a mouse online. It makes database using very much easier than it used to be even 15, 25, certainly 30 or 40 years ago. So click here for the Drought Monitor Map. When you get to this map, it defaults to this page. So here's your navigation bar right here. The current map is what comes up, okay? And never forget that we got Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, Hawaii, Puerto Rico. We have different areas and different sections, the Mariana Islands, America, Samoa. You got all these areas that are considered part of the United States, our territories. Well, these colors correspond, as mentioned earlier, to this intensity and impact. The darker the color, the more intense the drought is. So for some reason, you might be colorblind or shade blind. There are many students who are. You can look for intensity of grays or black, and you will be able to see that there is a difference. So if you do struggle with that, you need to reach out to me after you've tried to do the lab, but don't wait till the last minute. Another thing worthy to point out is the S and the L. You'll be asked for what this means in your lab, but I want to show you on the map what this translates to. So you got short-term impacts and long-term impacts. And you can see where it might say SL, here's an L right here. And notice as I select on a region, it turns all the states kind of a limeish green color that are in that region. So here's the South, here's the Midwest, here's the West, here's the Northeast, here's the part of the Midwest, here's the South. You kind of get the gist, right? And you can even see on the eastern part of the country, there are sections that also have drought issues that are short term. Here's one that's long term way up here. So that's important. In addition, you can come down and scroll down and read about this week's drought summary. One of your questions will ask you how often is the map updated and what data is used to do it. So as you go through this process, that can be very, very useful. So as you're navigating through this lab, all of these tabs matter. And some of your initial questions actually come from the About section of the web page. And I've also included a PDF of this that comes directly from the United States Drought Monitor or North America Drought Monitor page. And you can look through it. It shares the same information here. But you need to read all of this because it's part of the storyboard, and you should read this first before you get started. One of the first things I'm going to ask you to do when you get into the current map is I'm going to ask you about information about the various different regions, what the colors mean. After I've asked you some questions about that, then you'll move into this section of the United States Drought Monitor webpage, which is the maps themselves. I want to be clear, you'll be using multiple different ones of these maps, but not at the same time. So I will be asking you to compare 2 weeks. I will be asking you to look at Drought Monitor change maps. So I'm going to demonstrate for you how to use this map, but not necessarily with the same items that you'll have to manipulate. So this is data manipulation, what I'm asking you to do. And manipulation doesn't mean a bad thing. It simply means variables. So you're changing the variables. So when you do the area type, you can do it by state. You can do it by climate region. You can do it by forecast offices. Gets to a much more local level. You can do it by other regions like our territories, but we're probably going to use the national. Then you have a choice of continental or the United States and Puerto Rico. Go ahead and stick with continental for now, unless you're living in Puerto Rico. And then you can change the variables here and everywhere you want to do. And we'll just do a cumulative percent area. So when that happens, it's going to bring up comparing 2 weeks. This is where students get stuck. They're like, well, the map's there, but I can't tell what week it is. Let me show you how. Let's make it easy. These are the variables that you control. So let's say I want to look at maps in 2021. Well, the most recent map that's been developed is February 2nd of 2021. I'm recording this video on a later date than that, but since these are only updated once a week, that's why. So then let me compare that to a February one from 2020. We'll just look at the same one close to it, February 4th. And when I do that, it changes the maps. And what that allows you to do is to compare and contrast 1 year ago, what that looked like in terms of drought to what it looks like now. I might hypothesize as a scientist that we had a wetter year last year in February, because look, the risk was, while we see a trend in the same basic areas, you can notice that the intensity from being at a D2, 3, or 4 is substantially less a year ago than it is in 2021 in February. So that's a super important thing. So remember, when you're using the compare 2 weeks, you enter in the area type, the area and statistics type, then beneath the two maps are where you're going to change the actual date. So another map that you're going to use will be the Drought Monitor Change Map. This is important. You'll do a number of different comparisons here. So let's say you're going to take the date here, and then same kind of things. You have the same basic choices as you did before. And this is where it gets interesting. So I'm going to ask you to do multiple different ones of these scenarios, right? And that way you'll be able to see exactly what's going on and how things have changed. So I'm going to do one for a 1 week, and then it's going to come up, and I can download this as a. So you're going to download this and save it as 1 week, so you have it. Then you'll come in and you'll change it to 4 weeks. The map's changed. Do the same thing. Keep your windows open. See how to open a separate window? Then I can come in and I can do 8 weeks. Then I can do 12 weeks. Then I can do 24 weeks. So you're starting to see a change. And then I can do 52 weeks. Okay? And you save each one of these little documents to your hard drive. So all you would do is take this and then open it. And I'm going to give you a little cool thing I've shown you before. I'm going to bring up my cool snipping tool, and I'm going to make a new one, and I can just highlight this, do a save as. I'll save it to my desktop. 2 week map comparison. So I do that, and I'd save each one that way. You're going to load up each of these maps to show me that you've done it. But the whole reason that I've asked you to look at these maps is so you can make a comparison and contrast, and you can do some good critical thinking skills. So let me bring back up that lab form for you. And I want to get to, after the help that I've given you through 1 through 15, that means question 16 on. So question 16 and 17, you may have to do a little research on your own. I didn't provide you a link for this. It's not necessary. This is what comes up here, knowledge base and a little good old-fashioned research. I'm going to ask you about how droughts impact farmers or the agricultural industry. So you might go, well, that's obvious. I want you to be very specific, and I want you to think about it. I want you to think about, after you've gone through this exercise, why would these maps be really valuable for that industry? What if you owned a farm, let's say in South Dakota, and you were farming, let's say, 2,000 acres? Why would this information be valuable to you? When I'm asking you how it affects in number 17, your personal and professional life, sometimes I get answers like, well, it doesn't. I have no idea how it does. That's not an acceptable answer, because it does impact your life. Whether you live in a rural area or you live in a city, you are impacted by droughts, down to what happens with your water bill. So this is the kind of thing I'm asking you to think about. Maybe you have a professional job that needs to have customers, and their customers are paying more for water during droughts, so they can't afford your services. Maybe you are somebody that works in city government in the water supply provider's office, and they need to issue a water conservation restriction. How does that affect you? How does that affect your job? How does that affect you dealing with customers? I want you to start thinking about real life applications of what you learn about in this class, because it really matters. When you get to question 18, I do provide a web page for you. But let's say that it doesn't work. You can do your homework and type in Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TCEQ, and type in water restrictions. And this is the hit you're going to get. It's not acceptable to make an answer, well, a website just didn't work, so I didn't answer it. I couldn't figure out how to use it. Take some time to learn it. If you didn't allow for enough time to do a lab, I think that's on you. I'm giving you ample instructions on how to do it, with suggestions on how to improve. So this is the current map that shows the public water supplies and systems that are currently affected by water restrictions across the state. So the little yellow triangles means they have a voluntary restriction, and then the orange squares means there are mandatory restrictions. So that's important, because look at that in correlation with what you found on your drought map through the Drought Monitor webpage, and see if there's some crossover. If there's not, what could be some other reasons for that? So as you're answering these remaining questions, 19 and 20, I've asked you to apply the information. There's no website per se that's going to help you with this. Maybe in 20, I give you a suggestion to go look at the City of Waco water conservation practices, but don't copy and paste. Put them in your own words. Come up with some new ideas. This lab is all about you understanding what droughts are, how they affect people, how they actually translate to dryness. So we could correlate that to another activity for you to look at wildfires. There is a direct correlation. The other real important takeaway from this lab is how to manipulate a database like the Drought Monitor website. They're not hard to use. So important information for you to take away. So when you get ready to submit this lab, you're going to want to do a save as after you've taken out those initial questions. And you're going to want to change this last part that says new and put your name in there. So for me, that would be this. And I would type that. Okay, and then you would save it. That's how you need to submit your lab. That's enough for now. If you have more questions, let me know.